Picture the most beautiful dining room you have ever seen. Mahogany table polished until it holds candlelight like dark water. Silver so bright it hurts to look at. Crystal glasses arranged in ranks like soldiers. Now fill that table with food that would make you gag. A soup made from the boiled head of a calf, its brains rolled into little balls and fried. A jelly made from cow hooves simmered for 7 hours until the kitchen smells like a tannery. Vegetables boiled so long they have surrendered their colour, their texture, and their will to live. Bread whitened with a chemical that gives children stomach cramps. Milk thinned with water from a pump that stands 20 feet from a cesspit, then thickened again with chalk so nobody notices. Sweets coloured green with a pigment made from arsenic and copper, sold to children at a penny a bag. That's a fashionable Victorian dinner. That's London in 1857, the richest city in the history of the world, the capital of an empire that covers a quarter of the earth, and almost everything on the table is either boiled grey, secretly poisonous, or both. A place where you could eat a 12-course dinner served on silver in the evening and spend the entire night doubled over a chamber pot wondering which course betrayed you. We're going back there tonight, not as guests at the table, looking at the silver and the candles. We're going below the table, down the servants' staircase into the basement kitchen where the actual food gets made. One day, one person, everything she would have seen, smelled, tasted, and somehow survived. So I make these history stories, and honestly, I have no clue if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just weirdos who enjoy hearing about brain fritters and arsenic candy. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Here we go. The calf's head is going off and it is your fault. That's the first thought in your mind before you're even properly awake, before your eyes have opened, before you know what time it is or where your hands are. The calf's head. It came from the butcher yesterday afternoon, wrapped in cloth, and cook said to set it in the coldest corner of the larder on the marble slab. And you did, you're almost sure you did, but almost sure is not a thing you're allowed to be. Tonight the mistress is giving a dinner for 10. The soup is mock turtle. Mock turtle begins with a calf's head, and if that head has turned in the night, if it's gone slick and sweet-smelling the way meat goes in a warm larder, there is no dinner, and if there is no dinner, somebody has to be blamed. And in this house, blame flows downhill, and you are the lowest point in the house. Your eyes open to darkness. For a moment, maybe half a second, you've forgotten where you are. Then it hits you, the smell. It's not just one smell, it's layers. Cold grease first, always cold grease. The ghost of every joint of mutton ever roasted in this house, soaked into the very plaster of the walls. Then coal dust, gritty and mineral, from the scuttle by the door and from your own hair, because you carry coal every day and coal does not let go. Then something faintly rotten drifting up through the floorboards from the drain in the scullery, a drain that connects, eventually, to things you try not to think about. And underneath it all, the close, sour smell of 2 people sleeping in a room the size of a large cupboard, unwashed since Sunday, because hot water in this house belongs to the family and you are not the family. That last smell includes you. Welcome to London in November 1857. You're lying on a straw mattress on an iron bedstead in an attic room at the top of a tall, thin house on Woburn Place, Bloomsbury, 4 floors above the kitchen where you will spend the next 17 hours. Your name is Ellen Marsh. You're 15 years old and you arrived here 8 months ago from a village in Suffolk with 1 spare dress, a Bible you can mostly read, and a character reference from the rector describing you as clean, willing, and honest. Back home? Everyone said London would either make you or swallow you. They weren't wrong. They just didn't mention that it might do both at once. Beside you, in the same bed, Sarah the housemaid is still asleep, breathing through her mouth, one cold foot pressed against your shin. Yes, you share a bed. That's normal. Nearly every servant in London shares a bed. Privacy is a luxury that costs money, and you earn £8 a year, which is not money, not really, not in a city where the mistress upstairs will spend more than that tonight on wine alone. Somewhere below, a church clock begins to strike. St. Pancras. New church, probably, with its strange stone women holding up the porch roof, copied from a temple in Athens 2,000 years old. 5 o'clock. The strikes come up through the cold air like something falling down a well, and before the 5th one has finished you are out of bed, because cook rises at 5:30, and the kitchen fire must be lit, cleaned, and drawing before cook's foot touches the last stair. And if it isn't, cook has a way of looking at you that is worse than shouting. The floorboards are ice under your bare feet. Not cold. Ice. There is frost on the inside of the window, feathered across the glass in patterns that would be beautiful if you had time for beauty. You break the skin of ice on the water jug with your knuckles, and the crack of it is loud in the dark. And Sarah groans and pulls the blanket over her head. You splash water on your face, and the shock of it empties your mind completely for one merciful second. The water smells faintly of the cistern, which smells faintly of everything a London cistern smells of. You try not to let it touch your lips. You dress in the dark by feel. Coarse wool stockings darned at both heels, the darns forming hard little knots you'll feel with every step until noon, when your feet go numb and stop reporting. A grey cotton print dress, its fabric worn soft and thin at the elbows. Over it, the apron. The apron is the important thing. It's rough sacking cloth for the morning work, and it will be black to the waist by 7, and that is its job. There's a second apron, white, folded in the drawer, and you're only allowed to touch that one if you're sent up above stairs, which almost never happens, because girls like you are not supposed to be seen above stairs. The house runs on your hands, and the whole point of the house is to pretend it runs on nothing at all. You go down 4 flights of stairs in the dark, carrying your boots so the family doesn't wake. The back stairs are narrow and uncarpeted, and they turn tightly at each landing, and you know every tread by heart, which ones creak, which one has the nail-head standing proud that has torn 3 of your stockings. Down past the family floors, where the air is warmer and smells of lavender and last night's candle smoke. Down past the ground floor, where the dining room waits in the dark with its long table like an altar. Down the last flight, into the basement, into the dark that belongs to you. And then you stand at the larder door with a candle stub in your hand, and you make yourself open it. The larder breathes out at you. Cold stone, cold marble, the sharp smell of yesterday's milk, the flat smell of suet, the iron smell of a hare hanging by its heels in the corner, going properly high the way the master likes it. And there, on the marble slab, wrapped in its cloth like something waiting for a funeral, the calf's head. You unwrap it with 2 fingers, holding the candle close. The cloth is stiff with cold. The head looks up at you, or would, if the butcher hadn't already taken the eyes. Its skin is pale and waxy, scalded and scraped clean of hair, and its lips are pulled back slightly from big flat teeth in something that is not a smile but is not a smile. You lean in close enough that the cold coming off it touches your cheek, and you sniff. Cold meat, clean bone. Nothing sweet, nothing slick. It has kept. The relief goes through your whole body down into your knees, and you have to stand there a moment holding the edge of the slab. Then you wrap the head back up gently, the way you'd tuck in a child, and you go to light the fire, and the day begins for real. Here is what you have learned about fire in 8 months. The kitchen range is a god, and you are its priest, and it is not a kind god. It is a great black iron thing called a kitchener, 6 feet of it, built into the chimney, with an open fire in the middle, an oven on one side, a boiler on the other, and a flat iron top where the pots go. It was installed 12 years ago, and the mistress is very proud of it, though the mistress has never touched it, because the mistress does not come down here. Before you can cook anything, before anyone in this house can have so much as a cup of tea, the range must be raked out and the ash carried away, and the flues brushed, and the whole black face of it rubbed with blacklead until it shines like a beetle, and then the fire laid and lit and coaxed, and this takes you the better part of an hour, on your knees, in the dark, in the cold. You rake the ash, and it rises around you in a fine grey cloud that settles on your eyelashes and in your throat and turns your spit grey. You carry the ash bucket up the area steps into the black morning air, and the cold out there is different from the cold inside, wetter, with the river in it, and the smoke of 100,000 chimneys just beginning to lift into the sky. You can hear London waking. Iron wheels on stone somewhere, a costermonger's donkey, a watchman's rattle streets away, the city clearing its throat, then back down, and the blacklead, which is a paste of graphite that you rub into the iron with a brush and then polish with a cloth, and it works its way into the creases of your knuckles and under your nails and into the fine cracks of your chapped hands where it stings, and no amount of washing gets it fully out, so that your hands are always faintly grey, always. And when you went to church your first month here, a woman glanced at your hands and moved her prayer book slightly away, as if grey hands were a thing that spread. You lay the fire. Paper, kindling, small coal, larger coal, the architecture of it as precise as anything the men who built St. Pancras ever drew. You strike a match, and the sulphur bites your nose, and the flame catches the paper, and you kneel there with your face close to the iron listening. The fire has a language. First the light crackle of kindling, dry and quick, then a deeper sound as the coal catches, a soft roaring, a breathing. The flue begins to pull. Warmth touches your face like a hand. For 1 minute, maybe 2, you allow yourself to stay there, kneeling in front of the open fire door, letting the heat soak into your cracked hands, into the split at the corner of your right thumb that opened in October, and will not close now until spring. The chilblains on your fingers itch as they warm, a deep, maddening itch inside the flesh itself, and you know better than to scratch. This is the best moment of your day. It is 5:40 in the morning, and the best moment of your day has already happened. Then you hear cook's tread on the stairs, heavy and even, and you're on your feet with the kettle filled before her shape fills the doorway. Mrs. Grimshaw is a wide, solid woman of about 50, built like the range itself, with forearms that could crack walnuts and a face that gives away exactly nothing. She's been a cook for 32 years in 4 households, and she can tell whether a fowl is fresh by pressing one thumb against its breastbone, and she can tell whether you're lying by pressing one look against your face. She is not cruel. You want to be clear about that, even to yourself, even at 5:40 in the morning. She has never struck you, which makes her better than the cook in your friend Martha's house in Gordon Square, who throws things, But Mrs. Grimshaw has standards the way other people have religion, and the standards are absolute, and you are at all times being measured against them, and the measuring never stops, and she will tell you the result in as few words as possible. Fire's slow, she says. The fire is not slow. The fire is perfect. She says this every morning. You've learned not to argue. You've learned that this is not really a statement about the fire at all. It's a statement about the world, about the general tendency of all things to fall short, and you are simply the nearest available example of all things. The head kept, you say instead. She grunts. That grunt is the closest thing to praise that exists in this kitchen before noon. Then she ties on her apron and looks at the slate on the wall where the day is written in her square chalk letters, and the two of you stand there for a moment in the firelight, looking at the slate together, like soldiers looking at a map of somewhere they're going to die, because tonight is the dinner, 10 covers, and the mistress, who's been reading her new cookery book all week the way other women read novels, has chosen the menu herself, and it goes like this: mock turtle soup, boiled cod with oyster sauce, boiled leg of mutton with caper sauce, turnips and carrots, a raised game pie, roast fowls, and then the sweets, which are the part that has been keeping you awake, a calf's foot jelly, wine-flavoured, that must stand tall and tremble and shine, and a blancmange, and a trifle, and dessert. Plus, because the mistress's mother is bedridden on the second floor with a weak digestion, the usual invalid tray 3 times a day, which is its own separate art of horror. And we will get to it. Believe me, we will get to it. 10 covers, 2 women and 1 kitchen to produce all of it. The footman will carry it up and the butler will pour the wine and the family will take the credit. But every spoonful of that dinner has to come out of this basement, out of these 2 pairs of hands, one of which is 50 years old and knows everything, and one of which is 15 years old and cracked at the thumb. Breakfast first, says Mrs. Grimshaw. Then the old lady's tray, then you're to the shops and mind what I told you about the milk. And here is where I need to stop the story for a moment and tell you about breakfast in this house, because breakfast is where the day's first small humiliation lives, and it's so ordinary that nobody in 1857 would even think to mention it. The family's breakfast, which goes up at 9, is eggs, bacon, hot rolls, toast, marmalade, tea and coffee. Your breakfast, which happens at 6:30 standing up, is bread and dripping and a cup of tea made from leaves that have already been used once in the servants' hall of the house next door, because the cook there sells her used tea leaves to a dealer, and the dealer dries them, stiffens them with a little gum, colours them with blacklead, this same blacklead you polish the range with, and sells them again as fresh tea to people who cannot afford real tea. You know this. Everybody knows this. There are men in London whose entire profession is recycling used tea leaves, and there are other men whose profession is making fake tea leaves out of ashen hawthorn and sloe leaves dyed with poisonous copper salts, and your tea this morning tastes the way it always tastes, like hot brown water with a memory of tea in it, plus something faintly metallic that you've decided not to think about. You eat standing at the dresser, because sitting is for meals, and this is not a meal, this is fuel. The bread is yesterday's. The dripping is beef fat from Sunday's joint, white and dense in its basin, and you spread it thick because it is the only fat you will taste all day that is honestly what it claims to be. It tastes of roast beef and salt, and it coats the inside of your mouth, and it is genuinely the best thing you will eat today. Remember that. The kitchen maid's bread and dripping, eaten standing in the dark, is going to be better than anything served on silver tonight. Hold on to that fact. It's the whole story, really, in one bite. Now, the Invalid tray, upstairs on the second floor, in a room with the curtains kept half drawn, lives the mistress's mother, old Mrs. Cavendish, who is 78, and has what the doctor calls a delicate stomach. And what the doctor prescribes for a delicate stomach in 1857 is a category of food so bleak that it has its own chapters in every cookery book of the age. It is called Invalid cookery, and it is built on one great principle. Flavour is dangerous. Flavour excites. Flavour stimulates the system. A sick body, the doctors say, must be soothed with food that asks nothing of it. And so the food of the sick is food with everything removed. Food reduced to a kind of warm ghost. This morning, like every morning, you make 3 things. The first is gruel. You take 1 spoonful of oatmeal and a pint of water. Not milk. Water. You mix the oatmeal with a little cold water first, working it smooth with the back of a spoon against the side of the basin, feeling the grains crush, and then you pour on the boiling water and set it at the side of the fire, and you stir it, and you stir it, and you stir it for 20 minutes while it thickens into something that is not quite liquid and not quite solid, a pale grey suspension, the colour of the ash you carried out at 5:30. Then you strain it through a hair sieve, pressing it through with the spoon so that even the soft, swollen fragments of oat are removed, because fragments are exciting, and what goes up on the tray is a smooth grey gluey fluid with a teaspoon of sugar in it. That's it. That's the recipe. Real cookery books of this exact period specify it almost word for word. You have tasted it once, when a bowl came back down untouched and Mrs. Grimshaw nodded at it, waste being the one sin worse than theft, and you can report that it tastes of warmth and faintly of paste, like eating the idea of food after the food itself has left the room. The second thing is toast water, and I promise you I am not making this up, because it appears in respectable cookery books throughout the century as a wholesome drink for the sick. You take a slice of stale bread. You toast it at the fire on a fork, slowly, holding it to the coals, turning it, until it is not golden, not brown, but properly scorched, dark as a hymn book, hard as a roof slate. Your face cooks along with it, the fire heat tightening the skin of your cheeks while your back stays cold. That particular kitchen sensation of being 2 temperatures at once. Then you put the burnt toast in a jug, pour boiling water over it, cover it, and let it stand until cold. Then you strain off the water, and the water, which is now the colour of weak tea and taste of charcoal and old bread and nothing, is the drink. The toast itself is thrown away. You have made bread-flavoured water on purpose, following instructions, and it will go up on a silver tray with the lace cloth, and the old lady will drink it, because her doctor, a man with a brass plate on his door in Harley Street, has told her it is strengthening. The third thing is beef tea, and beef tea is the aristocrat of Invalid cookery, the one they all believed in, doctors and nurses and mothers, the great restorative of the age. Florence Nightingale herself, in her Notes on Nursing published just 2 years from now, will point out with some exasperation that beef tea contains barely any actual nourishment at all, that you could feed a patient pints of it, and they would still starve, but almost nobody will listen for another generation. Here is how you make it. You take a pound of good lean beef, rump, meat that a labouring family in Bethnal Green would consider a Sunday feast, and you cut it into small pieces, your knife working through the cold flesh, the fibres resisting and then giving. The smell of raw beef rising up, iron and mineral, the smell of money. A pound of beef costs about 8p halfpenny this year. You earn about 5p farthing a day. You're cutting up more than a day of your own wages, and you will now destroy it. You put the beef in a covered jar with water and a pinch of salt, and you stand the jar and a pan of water at the side of the fire, and you let it cook slowly for hours, never boiling, until everything red and living has been drawn out of the meat into the liquid. Then you strain it. The liquid is a clear brown tea, and it does taste of beef, genuinely, a thin, savoury shadow of beef. And it goes up to the sick room. And the meat, the actual pound of beef, now grey, exhausted, squeezed of everything, its fibres collapsed into something like wet string. The meat is done with, spent, and the books say it may be given to the poor. You are the poor. Some days you get it. It tastes of nothing at all, of texture without content, and you eat it anyway, standing up, because it is meat, and meat is meat, even after its soul has been strained off and sent upstairs on a tray. You carry the tray up the back stairs, 4 flights, the jug and basin chattering faintly against each other with each step, your arms learning the weight, and you hand it to Sarah at the baize door, because you do not go beyond the baize door. Your grey hands do not go beyond the baize door, and Sarah in her white apron carries the grey gruel into the world of lavender and carpets, and you go back down into the dark, and that is the closest you will come to the family you feed until the day you leave this house. At 8:30, Mrs. Grimshaw gives you the basket, the list, and the lecture. The lecture is about milk, and it is the same lecture every time, delivered in the same flat voice, and it goes like this. You are to go to the dairy on Marchmont Street, not the one on the corner. You're to watch the man pour. If the milk comes from the churn at the back and not the one in the window, you're to say the mistress will be sending her custom elsewhere. You're to smell it, and if it is blue at the edges, you're to bring it back anyway, because there is no better to be had, but you are to tell her, so she knows how much to trust it in the custards, blue at the edges. Let me explain what she means, because this is the heart of tonight's story, the thing underneath everything, and it is worse than anything I could invent. Almost nothing you can buy to eat in London in 1857 is entirely what it says it is. Not the milk, not the bread, not the tea, not the coffee, not the sugar, not the mustard, not the pepper, not the beer, not the sweets. The word for it is adulteration, and it is not a crime, or rather, it is barely a crime, prosecuted so rarely that no one bothers to hide it much. Back in 1820, a chemist named Friedrich Accum published a book cataloguing what London's food really contained, and he put a quotation on the title page from the second book of Kings, "There is death in the pot." He was hounded out of the country within a year, partly, people said, because he had named names, and then for 30 years the pot went right on killing quietly, until just a few years ago, in the early 1850s, a doctor named Arthur Hill Hassell started putting London food under a microscope for the Lancet, sample after sample, shop after shop, and publishing what he found, with the shopkeepers' names and addresses printed in full. What he found is the world you're walking through right now with your basket on your arm. The milk first. You come up the area steps into the street, and the morning has arrived while you are underground. Grey light, grey sky, the fog not thick today, but present. A soft yellow-grey gauze over everything that tastes very faintly of sulphur when you breathe through your mouth. Woburn Place is respectable. Tall brick houses, iron railings, a crossing sweeper already at his post at the corner, a boy younger than you keeping his patch of crossing swept clean of mud and dung for the chance of a halfpenny from anyone who crosses. You know him a little. His name is Tom. You've never seen him eat anything that wasn't bread. The dairy on Marchmont Street has a picture of a cow painted on its window, a lovely fat cream-coloured cow standing knee-deep in painted grass. The real cows, the ones actually supplying half of London's milk, live in sheds. City cows, kept in the dark in yards behind the streets, sometimes dozens in a shed built for 10, standing in their own filth, fed on spent brewery grains because it's cheap, milked until they collapse. Their milk is thin and poor to begin with, then it is watered. Hassel found that this is not even hidden inside the trade. There's a joking name for the water pump, the cow with the iron tail, and some dairies water the milk by a quarter, some by half. But watered milk looks watered, thin and bluish, so the colour must be put back, and the colour is put back with chalk or with a little flour, and the richness is suggested with anything from boiled carrot juice to, in the worst shops, sheep's brains whisked in to give it body. I want to be careful here. The brain story was reported and repeated across the century and may have been rare, but chalk and water were not rare. Chalk and water were breakfast. You watch the man pour from the window churn. The milk moves the way milk should move, with a little weight to it. You lift the can and smell. Grass faintly, cowshed faintly, nothing sour. It is probably 1/5 water. This is a good dairy. That is what a good dairy means. Next, the baker's, and here you buy the bread for the servants' hall and the rolls of the family, and the two are different, and the difference is the whole social order in miniature. The family's rolls are white, beautifully white, poem white, and the whiteness is the problem. English wheat flour does not naturally bake up that white. To get that fashionable pallor, and to help cheap flour hold more water so the loaf weighs heavier, nearly every baker in London adds alum, a mineral salt, an astringent chemical also used for fixing dye and dressing leather. Hassel tested bread from dozens of London bakers and found alum in essentially all of it. In small doses it binds up your digestion, and in children, who in poor families live on almost nothing but bread, it causes gnawing stomach troubles, and it locks away nourishment from bodies that have none to spare. The white roll the mistress will butter tonight is, mildly, chemically, dressed like a pair of gloves. The servant's loaf, browner, heavier, cheaper, is honestly slightly safer, and nobody upstairs would eat it on a bet, because in 1857 the colour of your bread is the colour of your class, and everyone would rather eat alum than eat brown. The grocer's next, and the grocer's is where you keep your face still and your eyes open, because the grocer's is a museum of quiet lies. The tea we have discussed. The coffee on the shelf, ground, is anywhere from 1/3 to half chicory root, roasted and ground to look the same, and some of the chicory itself is adulterated with roasted carrot and burnt sugar, so that there are frauds inside the frauds, forgeries of forgeries. The mustard is diluted with flour and turned back to mustard colour with turmeric, or in nastier shops with lead chromate, which is a paint pigment. The pepper is stretched with floor sweepings and ground rice. There was an actual commercial product in this trade called pepper dust, and a lower grade still, the sweepings of the sweepings. The vinegar has sulfuric acid in it to make weak vinegar taste sharper. The pickles glow an impossible, beautiful green because they have been boiled with a copper penny in the pan or dosed with copper salts outright, and everyone knows this, and cookery books of the age know it too, and I need you to sit with what I'm about to tell you. Some cookery books of this era actually include the copper trick as advice, as a tip, to keep your pickles a nice bright green. The poison is not hiding in the recipe. Sometimes the poison is the recipe and the sugar. The loaf sugar for upstairs is mostly sound. The cheap moist sugar for downstairs is cut with sand, with flour, and it comes with something extra, something alive, a microscopic creature called the sugar mite. And Hassel found the cheap sugars of London so infested with them that he suggested in print that this might explain the mysterious skin disease known in the trade as grocer's itch, the raw crawling rash on the hands and forearms of the men who handle the sugar barrels all day. The grocer's boy who scoops your order has scabbed red wrists. You look at them, and then you don't look at them. You pay, you count your change twice because you must account for every farthing to Mrs. Grimshaw, who accounts for every farthing to the mistress, and you step back out into the street, and your basket now weighs maybe 15 pounds and will get heavier at the butcher's, the handle pressing a deep red line across your forearm that will still be there at bedtime, and you stand for one moment in the grey morning with the fog tasting of sulphur, holding a basket full of chalk milk and alum bread and sanded sugar, all bought carefully from the good shops, and somewhere behind you the painted cow stands in her painted grass, smiling at nothing. The butcher's shop on Lamb's Conduit Street is open to the street. No glass, the meat hanging in the cold air where the flies can't survive this time of year, which is why the mistress gives her big dinners in November. Sides of beef on iron hooks, a row of sheep's heads on the marble looking patient, rabbits hanging in pairs. The butcher, Mr. Dunmore, is a red-faced man with forearms like Mrs. Grimshaw's and a long striped apron stiff with old blood, and he calls you my duck, and he is one of perhaps 4 people in London who is reliably kind to you, and you suspect he is kind to you because you represent a house that pays its meat bill quarterly and on time. But you have decided to take the kindness anyway. Kindness in this city is like the milk. You take what's offered and don't test it too hard. Today you collect the second half of tonight's order, the calves' feet. 4 of them, scalded, scraped, split down the middle by Mr. Dunmore's cleaver with 4 flat bangs that you feel in your own teeth, each foot heavy and cold and slippery in its wrapping. The split faces showing white bone and pale pink and translucent bands of the stuff you're going to spend your entire afternoon extracting. Because tonight's jelly, the tall shining wine-flavoured jelly that will tremble on a silver stand as the crown of the mistress's table, does not come from a packet. There are no packets. Gelatine you can buy ready-made exists, just barely, but the mistress does not trust it, and the cookery books sniff at it. And so jelly comes from feet, from hooves, from the boiled-down connective tissue of a calf, and between the foot in your basket and the sparkle on the table stand 7 hours of work, and every one of those hours is yours and Mrs. Grimshaw's, and none of them will be mentioned at dinner. "Mind how you go, my duck," says Mr. Dunmore. "Slippy by the pump." It is slippy by the pump. Everything is slippy by the pump. You go home the long way anyway, 3 minutes longer, because the long way passes the end of a street, from which, between 2 dark rows of houses, you can see it, far off to the southeast, riding above the smoke of the whole city, the dome of St. Paul's, Christopher Wren's Cathedral, finished in 1710, 147 years ago, 365 feet from the street to the top of the cross, and on a clear day it is silver grey, and on a foggy day it is a ghost of itself, a shape suggested rather than shown, floating on the smoke of 600,000 coal fires. Your grandmother's grandmother could have watched them setting the last stones of that lantern. It's that recent, that real. You're a girl with chalk milk in a basket and grey blacklead in the cracks of your hands, and for 8 or 9 seconds every morning you stand at the end of a Bloomsbury street and look at the most famous dome in the world, and then the fog closes, or a wagon crosses, and you pick up your feet and go back down the area steps into the ground. Back in the kitchen, the real work starts, and the real work starts with the head. Mock turtle soup. I want to explain what this dish is, because it is one of the strangest culinary ideas the English ever committed to, and it sits right at the centre of tonight's dinner. In the 18th century, ships coming back from the West Indies brought live green sea turtles, and turtle soup became the most fashionable, most expensive, most status-drenched dish in England. Whole guilds and city corporations built banquets around it. A real turtle cost a fortune, needs a specialist to butcher it, and most households will never see one. But fashion flows downhill even when money doesn't, and so the cooks of England worked out that the flesh of a calf's head, being gelatinous, sticky, tender when boiled, is the closest cheap thing in texture to turtle meat. Not in taste, in texture. And so was born mock turtle, the head of a calf, boiled and dressed up in wine and spice and forcemeat to impersonate a reptile it has never met. A soup that is a forgery of another soup, which makes it, when you think about it, the most honest dish in London, because at least it admits it in the name. The fake soup is the only food in your basket that told you it was fake. Mrs. Grimshaw unwraps the head on the big deal table, and the two of you look at it, and it looks back with its empty sockets, and she rolls up her sleeves. Water, she says, and the small knife. First the head must be soaked and cleaned, and then it goes into the biggest pot in the kitchen, a copper stock pot you could bathe a toddler in, and hauling that pot onto the range when it's full is a 2-person lift. Your side of the handle biting into your fingers, the water shifting its weight with slow malice. 30 pounds of it easy, your back taking the load in that low, careful way Mrs. Grimshaw taught you the first week. Lift with your legs, girl, or you'll be no use to anyone by 20. The head goes in whole, the water climbs over it, the lid goes on, and for the next hour the kitchen fills, slowly, completely, with the smell of boiling calf's head, and I will do my best with this smell. It is the smell of meat, but meat at its most anatomical. A warm, damp, faintly sweet, faintly sour smell of skin and bone and glue. A smell that settles on your clothes and your hair, and the insides of your nostrils and stays. It is not exactly a bad smell. It is worse than a bad smell. It is an almost good smell, and the almost is the part that gets you. While the head boils, the skimming. This is your job, and it is a job that cookery books of the period treat with religious seriousness. As the water heats, a grey-brown scum rises, the blood and albumen of the meat coagulating into a dirty foam, and it must be lifted off with a flat skimmer. Patiently, again and again, because scum left in the pot means a muddy soup, and a muddy soup at the mistress's table means questions coming down the stairs. So you stand over the pot in the rising steam, your face slick, your hairline dripping, sleeves rolled, skimming, tapping the skimmer clean against the slop basin, skimming again, and the steam smells of glue, and the fire roars softly at your knees, and your feet have gone past cold into a kind of buzzing static. And this, the skimming, the standing, the wet face and frozen feet, this is what the word cooking mostly means in 1857, not creation, attendance. You attend upon the pot the way the crossing sweeper attends upon his crossing. When the head has boiled long enough that the flesh will leave the bone, it comes out steaming, monstrous, glistening onto the table, And now comes the part I genuinely hesitated over including and decided I had to because it is in every recipe. The flesh is cut from the skull in neat pieces, the cheeks, the fatty translucent skin, the parts around the jaw, everything sticky and rich with gelatine, and it is set aside to be trimmed into tidy squares. The tongue comes out and is skinned, the grey outer layer peeling back under your knife to show the clean meat beneath. And the skull is opened for the brains, because the brains are not waste. The brains are an ingredient, the recipe books are perfectly calm about it. The brains are washed in several waters, your fingers working the soft, cool mass under the tap stream from the cistern, cleaning away the fine membranes and the threads of blood. And it is the strangest texture your hands know, softer than anything else you touch in your working life. Soft past the point where softness is pleasant. Cool custard that was very recently thinking, and then they are mixed with breadcrumbs and chopped herbs and beaten egg, and shaped between your palms into small balls, and fried, and these brain balls, along with forcemeat balls of veal and sweet, will float in the finished soup as garnish. At the grandest tables, real turtle soup came with garnishes too, and so the mock version must have them, and so a calf's thoughts, breaded and fried, will bob in wine-dark broth under the chandelier tonight, and a gentleman will chase one around his plate with a spoon, and say that Mrs. Cavendish's cook has a very fair hand with her forcemeat, very fair indeed. The broth itself is built up through the afternoon, the strained head liquor, a knuckle of veal for body, onions stuck with cloves, sweet herbs, mace, a bottle of Madeira wine that costs more than your week, lemon, cayenne. Tasting is Mrs. Grimshaw's office, not yours. She dips the tasting spoon, considers with her eyes half shut, adds 3 drops of lemon, considers again. Once, in your second month, you reached for the tasting spoon yourself just to learn, just to understand what she was chasing, and she did not shout. She simply looked at you and said, "When it's your soup, you'll taste it." And the sentence had a whole career inside it, hers and yours, 30 years of kitchens, and you put the spoon down. You season by permission. You taste by permission. Your mouth, in this kitchen, is on loan. And somewhere in the middle of all this, around 1 o'clock, comes servants' dinner. The one-sitting meal of your day, 20 minutes at the corner of the table you're simultaneously working on. Boiled beef flank, the cheap end, grey and stringy but hot, with potatoes and the pot liquor. And it is fine. It is honestly fine. It is hot salt meat, and you are 15 and burning 4,000 calories a day, hauling coal and copper pots, and you eat like a ploughman, and Mrs. Grimshaw pretends not to notice and cuts you a second slice without being asked. Which is, by the standards of this kitchen, a love letter. Then the mutton, because a boiled leg of mutton waits for no one. Here is the thing you have to understand about fashionable English cooking at this exact moment in history, the philosophy underneath tonight's whole menu, and once you see it, you cannot stop seeing it. The Victorians of this class are afraid of flavour, genuinely, medically, morally afraid of it. Spice inflames the blood. Rich sauces overtax the stomach. Garlic is foreign, and foreign is a category of danger. Strong seasoning in the food of the young is thought to lead, in a chain of reasoning the doctors write down with straight faces, toward every kind of appetite a young person shouldn't have. The great safe virtue is plainness, and the great engine of plainness is boiling, and so this civilization, which owns the spice roots of the entire planet, which taxes pepper in Malabar and cinnamon in Ceylon and nutmeg in the Banda Islands, sits down each evening to meat boiled in water and vegetables boiled in more water, and calls it wholesomeness, and the empire's spices go into the hold of a ship and come out in a warehouse and go onto a grocer's shelf where they are promptly adulterated with brick dust, because nobody at this end is using enough of them to notice. So, the leg of mutton, 9 pounds of it, goes into the second great pot, into water, with a handful of salt, and it will simmer for close to 3 hours, and the whole art of it, the entire art, is that the water must never gallop, only shiver, because hard boiling sets the meat tough as harness leather. And so once again you attend, you watch the surface of the water the way a shepherd watches weather, adjusting the pot an inch toward or away from the heat, skimming, always skimming, while your hands do 6 other things. The turnips are peeled, your peeling knife working around each one in a long dropping ribbon, the cold wet vegetable flesh numbing your fingertips, and the carrots scraped, and both go to boil until a fork meets no resistance anywhere, and then a little past that. For safety, because underdone vegetables are indigestible, everyone knows, and digestion is the terror of the age, and by the time they reach the table the turnips will be watery ghosts, and the carrots will have given their sweetness to the water, which will be thrown away. And the caper sauce, melted butter, the mother sauce of England, the sauce that visiting French cooks write home about in tones of horror. Flour and butter and water, whisked to a smooth white blandness, with a spoonful of capers stirred through, the one point of sharpness in the entire main course. Tiny pickled buds in vinegar. And the vinegar, as we know, is helped along with sulfuric acid, so that the single interesting thing on the plate is the one with battery acid in it. The cod, meanwhile, is tied in a cloth and boiled. Of course it is boiled, and its oyster sauce is more melted butter with stewed oysters folded in, and oysters this year are still so cheap in London that they are the food of the poor, for a penny from street stalls. Poverty food dressed in a butter coat and sent upstairs, and in 50 years overfishing will have made them a luxury, and nobody eating them tonight would believe you if you told them. By 4 o'clock the kitchen is at full pressure, every hole of the range is working, the air is thick enough to lean on. Steam, coal, glue smell of the stock, sweetness of the boiling jelly we're about to get to, the sharp top note of onions, the fat spitting under the roasting fowls that turn before the open fire on a clockwork jack that ticks and ticks and ticks like the afternoon itself being wound tighter. Your dress is soaked through between the shoulder blades. Your face is burned tight on the fireside and clammy on the other. There is a fresh scald on the inside of your left wrist. A neat red stripe from the edge of a pot lid, taking its place in the archive of marks that a cook's forearms keep. And Mrs. Grimshaw saw it happen, and said only, "Butter it later, no time now," which is both true and the whole of her tenderness. And the strange thing, the thing you could never explain to your mother in a letter, is that in the middle of all this, wet, scalded, aching from the hips down, you feel the machine of the kitchen running through you and around you. You and the old woman moving past each other in the narrow space without ever colliding, wordless, synchronized, 2 pairs of hands and one intention. And it is the closest thing to music your day contains. Now the jelly deserves its own telling, because the jelly is the afternoon's long war, and because when you understand what a Victorian table jelly actually costs in human hours, you will never look at a picture of one the same way again. The 4 split calves' feet went into their pot at 10 this morning, before the head was even cold on the table. Feet, water, nothing else. And since then they've been simmering. 5 hours now, 6 by the time they're done, while the water works at them, drawing the collagen out of a hoof and tendon and bone until the liquid turns from water into something else, something with a body to it, something that clings to the spoon and strings between your fingers when you rub them together, and the kitchen's glue smell deepens another register. And this is where jelly comes from, not from a shining mould, from this. From the underparts of a calf rendered down by a 15-year-old feeding coal to a fire hour after hour, the coal scuttle refilled 4 times, each trip up the area steps and back, 25 pounds a load, your right shoulder now permanently a 1/4 inch lower than your left. Or so Sarah claims, laughing, and you laugh too, and then checked in the scrap of mirror, and she's right. When the liquor is reduced and strong, it is strained and left to set overnight in the ordinary way of things. But there is no overnight available. The dinner is today. So Mrs. Grimshaw is running the fast method, cooling the stock in shallow pans on the larder slab. And while it cools comes the fat, because feet are fatty, and every trace of grease must come off the set stock, scraped away with a knife. Then the surface wiped with a cloth wrung out in hot water, your fingers working over the cold, trembling slab of raw jelly stock, which at this stage is not beautiful. At this stage it is a cloudy amber grey, smelling frankly of animal, and no one who saw it now would ever put it in their mouth. And that is the problem the whole rest of the process exists to solve, because a fashionable jelly must be clear, not clean. Clear, brilliant. You must be able to read a letter through it. That's the phrase the cooks use. And between cloudy and brilliant stands the clarification. And the clarification is a piece of genuine chemistry, performed by women who were never taught the word. Into the melted stock go sugar, lemon juice, cinnamon, sherry, and a little brandy. From the bottles the butler unlocked and stood over while Mrs. Grimshaw measured. Because the drink cupboard is counted. Everything in this house is counted. And then the whites of 6 eggs whisked to a froth, and the shells too, crushed in your fist with a dry splintering crunch. Egg white and shell go into the pot with the warming liquid, and you whisk, and the pot comes slowly up toward the boil, and the egg white cooks into a horrible grey raft of curd that spreads across the whole surface. And the trick, the entire trick, is that as that curd forms, it snatches up every floating particle of cloudiness and binds it to itself, the raft becoming a filter made of its own filth, and you let it rise once and settle and rise and settle 3 times, not stirring now, not touching, your whole day's work sitting under a lid of grey scum, an act of faith. Then the flannel. There is a jelly bag in this kitchen, a cone of thick flannel on a wooden stand, scalded clean, and the contents of the pot, raft and all, are poured through it, and the first pouring comes through cloudy and is poured back through, over and over, the bag steaming, your arms lifting the heavy jug again and again, wrists trembling, the drip slowing to a maddening patience, until at last, what falls from the point of the flannel cone into the clean basin below is a thread of liquid amber, red gold, flawless, catching the firelight, and you crouch down until your eyes are level with the basin just to watch it fall. And Mrs. Grimshaw, without looking up from the fowl, says, "It'll set or it won't," which is her way of saying it is perfect. Into the copper mould it goes, a tall fluted castle of a mould, tin-lined, and the tin lining matters. Note it, hold on to it, we will need it later tonight. And the mould goes down to the coldest slab in the larder, next to the blanc-mange in its own mould, and the blanc-mange is its own small essay in this dinner's strange logic. Almonds pounded in a mortar by your arm, an hour of pounding, actual muscle-burning work, and then the almond milk stiffened with isinglass, which is a setting agent made from the dried swimming bladders of Russian sturgeon, imported 2,000 miles so that a pudding in Bloomsbury can wobble, and the finished thing will be snow white, faintly sweet, faintly almond, mostly texture. A dish whose entire ambition is to be pale and to tremble. The fashionable table's ideal woman rendered in dessert form, and you may quote me on that. 6 o'clock. Upstairs, the first knocker goes. You hear it through 4 floors of house, through the stone, through the fire's roar, the way you have learned to hear everything upstairs. A low double thud like a heartbeat that isn't yours. The guests are coming, the soup goes to its final seasoning, the mutton comes out to rest under a cloth. The fowls are frothed with flour and butter at the last so their skin comes crisp off the jack. The footman, James, appears at the kitchen door in his livery with his hair oiled flat, smelling of pomade over sweat, and the procession of dishes begins up the stairs, through the baize door into the light, and you see none of it. That is the part of tonight I most need you to understand. The mistress's table will look by candlelight like a painting. The silver Epergne with its ferns, the ranked glasses, the mock turtle steaming in a china tureen with dolphins for handles. The ladies in silk that whispers when they sit, and every dish comes up the dark back stairs from a basement none of them has entered, carried past a girl standing flat against the wall of the landing to let James pass, a girl who made the food and will wash what it comes back on, and the machinery is designed deliberately, consciously, in the very architecture of the house, so that the people at the table never have to see her, never have to see the scalded wrist or the grey hands or the sweat, so that the dinner appears as if the house itself had exhaled it. Your work is only successful if it is invisible. That is the actual job description. Not cooking, vanishing. The plates come back down, and you read them like letters. The soup plates come back nearly empty, and Mrs. Grimshaw allows herself one nod at the tureens returning dregs. The fish comes back half-eaten, which is normal. Fish is a station in the way, not a destination. The mutton comes back down in ruins, well received. And with each course comes James, with bulletins delivered in a rush while he loads the next tray, and this is how the kitchen watches the dinner. Through James, the way a village watches a battle through one boy on a hill. 9th course in, he clatters down with the fowl carcasses and the news that Mr. Purslow, the fat gentleman from the bank, has taken 3 of the brain balls and called for the receipt to give his own cook, and Mrs. Grimshaw says he shan't have it, with the flat finality of a duchess declining a proposal, because a cook's receipts are her capital, her savings, her pension, the only property the law and the world allow her to be rich in, and she will carry the exact proportions of her forcemeat to her grave or to her own kitchen, whichever comes first. And then the sweets go up. The jelly comes out of the larder and the mould is dipped one breath into hot water, one breath only, too long and the outline melts, and Mrs. Grimshaw turns it out onto the stand with a movement she has done 10,000 times. Both thumbs, one shake, a soft sucking release, and the castle stands, tall, amber red, trembling, translucent. The candle flame behind it showing clean through, a letter readable through it if anyone cared to try. 7 hours of hoof and fire and flannel transformed into 6 seconds of astonishment. And even you, who know exactly what it is made of, who wash the feet it came from, even you stand for a moment and look at the light going through it and think, we made that out of feet. Us in the dark out of feet. James takes it up. Through the floor you hear very faintly the sound a dinner party makes when the jelly comes in. A soft collective vowel, the closest a Bloomsbury dining room comes to applause. Nobody sends compliments down. That is not a thing that happens. The jelly will be remembered as the mistress's jelly. The soup was the mistress's soup. She chose the receipts out of her book. Therefore the dinner is hers, the way a general's victory is his. Down in the steam, you and Mrs. Grimshaw eat standing bread and the trimmed ends of the mutton, and start on the copper pans, because the pans cannot wait, and this is the hour your body finally sends in its accounts. The small of your back one long dull coal of ache, the arches of your feet cramping in little spasms, the scald on your wrist tightening as it dries, the split thumb reopened by the soda in the washing water so that it stings with every pan, white sting regular as a pulse, and your hands keep moving anyway, because hands like yours learn early to work below the level where pain gets a vote, and then, a little before 10 o'clock with the ladies withdrawn and the gentlemen at their port, the bellboard on the kitchen wall jumps, and it is not the dining-room bell, and it is not the drawing-room bell. It is the bell for the second floor, the old lady's room, and bells at this hour from a sick room mean one thing before they mean anything else, and the kitchen goes quiet around the sound of it, both of you looking up at the little trembling brass tongue on its coil of wire. And Mrs. Grimshaw says, "Go on then," and you go up the back stairs 2 at a time with your heart knocking, and at the baize door Sarah meets you with a face the colour of the blancmange, and says the word that empties your stomach through the floor. Poisoned. Not the old lady. Worse, in the arithmetic of this house. A guest. The Purslows brought their daughter tonight, a girl of 9, too young for the table, who took her supper early in the morning room and was to sleep over in the spare room, and an hour ago she complained her mouth burned, and then that her throat burned, and then she was sick, violently, frighteningly, green, and she is now grey-white and crying and being sick again, and Mrs. Purslow has left the drawing-room at a run, with her silk hissing like a kettle, and Mr. Purslow the banker is standing in the hall with his port still in his hand, demanding in a low, terrible voice to know what the child was given to eat, and the answer that is at this moment travelling down through the house toward the kitchen like a stone dropped down a well, is that the child was given her supper from a tray, and the tray came from downstairs, and downstairs is you. I want to freeze this moment, because you need to understand what is actually at stake in the next hour, and it is not embarrassment. If the food from this kitchen poisoned a banker's daughter, Mrs. Grimshaw is finished. Not scolded. Finished. Dismissed without a character. And a cook of 50 dismissed without a character reference does not get another kitchen. She gets the workhouse eventually by one road or another. And you, the kitchen maid with 8 months' service and grey hands, you are finished with her, and you know with total clarity, standing on the landing with the gaslight buzzing, exactly how the story will be told, because you have lived in service for 8 months and you know how blame travels. It'll not be the mistress's menu, and it will not be the shops the mistress insists on for credit reasons. It will be the careless girl, something the girl did. The girl nobody upstairs has ever actually looked at, and your character reference from the rector, clean, willing, honest, will grow a shadow on it that no rector can pray off. The doctor is sent for. Dr. Skeen, 3 streets away, who attends the old lady, arrives inside 20 minutes with his bag, and the house arranges itself around his arrival the way houses do, and down in the kitchen you and Mrs. Grimshaw do the only thing you can do, which is reconstruct the child's tray, dish by dish, like 2 clerks balancing a ledger at gunpoint. The child had bread and butter, a cup of milk, a slice of cold chicken, and because it was a party and her mama allowed it, sweets, a paper bag of them, brought that afternoon by the Purslow's own nursemaid from a confectioner's shop near their house in Marylebone. Green and pink fondant drops and sugared almonds, and the bag stood on the child's supper tray, and she ate from it before bed, and at the word sweets, Mrs. Grimshaw's head comes up like a pointer's. Green, she says. Were they green? And here is what Mrs. Grimshaw knows, what every experienced cook in London knows in 1857, what the Lancet has been shouting for 5 years into a mostly indifferent wind. Cheap confectionery in this city is coloured with whatever is bright and costs nothing, and the brightest cheap green in the world is Sheila's green copper arsenite, an arsenic compound, a pigment for wallpaper and paint, and it goes into penny sweets, into the green leaves on sugar flowers, into pistachio-coloured creams, by the ounce. The reds can be red lead, the yellows can be lead chromate, the whites are cut with plaster of Paris and chalk. Hassall put London's sweets under his microscope, and found the shops of the poor selling paint in sugar form to children, and children have died of it, quietly, in ones and twos, written up as cholera or teething or fever, and next year in 1858 in Bradford, a sweetmaker's assistant will be sent to a druggist for the cheap plaster powder they cut lozenges with, and be given, by mistake, from an unlabelled cask, 12 pounds of arsenic, and the lozenges will go on sale in the market on a Saturday night. And by Monday around 20 people will be dead, most of them children, and more than 200 poisoned. And that catastrophe, that market stall in Bradford, is what will finally begin to force adulteration law through Parliament. That is next year. Tonight it is 1857, and there is no law with teeth, and there is a 9-year-old 2 floors up burning at the mouth, and Mrs. Grimshaw is asking the only question that matters. Sarah is sent up to ask and comes down with the bag itself, held out at arm's length like a live coal, and you clear a space on the scrub table, and Mrs. Grimshaw turns the sweets out under the lamp, and there they are, fondant drops, and half of them are green, and it is not the green of anything that grows. It is a mineral green, a wallpaper green, vivid as a beetle's back, chemically confident, and Mrs. Grimshaw looks at them for a long moment and does something you will remember for the rest of your life. She takes a knife, scrapes a little of the green coating onto the blade, and carries it to the range, and holds the blade in the fire, and leans over it, and sniffs the fume, once, sharply, and pulls her head back. Garlic, a hot metallic breath of garlic, in a kitchen where no garlic has ever been permitted through the door. That smell is arsenic burning. Cooks know it. Chemists know it. It is the oldest kitchen test there is. Take them up to the doctor, she says, wrapping the bag, and tell him, Shiel's green, and say it just so, and tell him the kitchen's food is at his service to examine every dish and the milk too. And you go up past the baize door into the gaslight and the carpet and the smell of port and wax, into the world where you do not exist, holding a bag of poisoned sweets, and you stand in the doorway of the spare room where the child lies grey against the pillows, with her mother gripping her hand, and Dr. Skene turns, and you say it just so, Shiel's green, sir. The cook thinks it's the sweets. They answers to the flame, and something moves in the doctor's face, surprise first, at the sentence arriving in a kitchen maid's mouth, and then attention, real attention. and he takes the bag and tilts the green drops under the lamp and says quietly, to the room, and to Mr. Purslow standing rigid at the foot of the bed, that the cook is very probably right, that he has seen this before, twice this year, that the child's symptoms answer to it exactly, the burning mouth, the sickness, and that the sickness, God be thanked, is the body's own remedy. She has thrown the worst of it off, and with rest and white of egg in water and thyme, she should do, 3 words, and the house exhales, and you stand there 1 second longer than you should, invisible in the doorway, watching a banker's daughter breathe, and Mrs. Purslow looks up and looks at you, actually at you, at your face and your grey hands and your sacking apron with the day's whole war written on it, and says, "Thank your cook." That's all. 2 words back down the well. But they were aimed, and they were meant, and you carry them down 4 flights like a lit candle, cupping them against the draught. You give them to Mrs. Grimshaw with the bag story, and she is scouring the copper-preserving pan, and she doesn't stop scouring, and she says, and then, after a full minute to the pan, not to you. Green sweets, green pickles, green wallpaper. They will keep buying poison so long as poison is the prettiest thing in the shop. And then, because the night is late and the pan is done and something in the day has loosened even her. You said it just so? Just so, Mrs. Grimshaw. Good girl. 2 words, aimed and meant. That's twice in one night. You will sleep on those 2 words like a feather bed. But the kitchen does not close on triumph, because the kitchen never closes on anything but work, and there is one more piece of food science left in this day, one more small horror, domestic-sized, and it is standing in the larder. The remains of the jelly came down, 1/3 of the castle uneaten, and Mrs. Grimshaw goes to put it by for tomorrow's nursery, and stops, and calls you over, and makes you look. Where the jelly has sat in contact with a chip in the tin lining of its copper mould, there against the exposed copper, the amber has taken on the faintest greenish cast, a shadow of that same beetle wing colour, and she cuts that whole side away and burns it, and tells you why. And this is the lesson, the last teaching of the night, the tinning girl. Copper pans and copper moulds are tinned inside for a reason, and when the tin wears through, the copper meets the acid in the food, wine, lemon, vinegar, fruit, and the food takes up the metal, and copper in food is poison, slow or quick, and a lazy kitchen with worn pans assaults its family's dinners with verdigris and never knows why the household ails. Every pan in this kitchen goes to the tineman the moment the copper shows. That is not thrift. That is the difference between a cook and a killer, and the difference is maintained by nobody but us. No inspector, no law. Nobody in 1857 stands between that chipped mould and that child's nursery except a fat old woman with a candle who checks her tinning. And now, also, you. Midnight. The last pan on its hook. The range banked for the night, its firebox breathing slow and orange behind the bars. You climb 4 flights on legs made of wet rope, and undress in the dark, and lie down next to Sarah's cold feet, and the house settles and ticks around you, full of sleeping people whose whole day passed through your hands, and just before sleep takes you, you think about the green sweets, and about the amber jelly with light going through it, and it comes to you simply, the way true things come at midnight, that they were the same colour story told twice. Poison dressed as beauty upstairs, beauty pulled out of hooves downstairs, and that of the 2 miracles, yours was the honest one. Morning comes too soon. It always comes too soon. but the morning after a dinner party it comes like a bailiff. The church clock pulls you up out of the dark at 5, same as always, and your body files its overnight report. Shoulders set like mortar, calves knotted, the scald on your wrist now a tight shiny stripe that pulls when you bend your hand, the split thumb crusted over and ready to split again at the first bucket of soda water, which is roughly 40 minutes away. You lie there for the length of one breath, listening to Sarah breathe, and then you get up, because the range does not care what yesterday was. And downstairs, waiting for you in the larder like a congregation, are the leftovers. And the leftovers are where I can show you the second great wing of terrible Victorian eating, because so far we have talked about the food of show, the mock turtle and the trembling jelly, the food that lies upward, pretending to be grander than it is. But most Victorian eating is not show. Most of it is thrift, and thrift has its own cookbook chapters, its own iron rules, and its own catalogue of dishes that would make you quietly close your eyes at the table. And the first rule of thrift is this: nothing dies only once. A joint of meat in a careful household is not a meal. It is a week. The mutton came down last night with perhaps 4 pounds still on the bone, and here is that mutton's future, laid out as surely as a railway timetable. Today it will be cold mutton, sliced and sent up at luncheon with pickles, the grey slices sweating gently under a net cover, the fat gone white and waxy and standing at the edge of each slice like a rind. And cold boiled mutton fat is a texture I will simply let you imagine against the roof of your own mouth. Tomorrow what remains will be hashed, sliced thin, warmed through, never boiled, in a brown gravy stretched from the bones. And hash is honestly not bad. Hash is the good day. The day after, the scraps go through the mincing knife and become rissoles or shepherd's pie, the meat now twice cooked and once minced, dry as flannel at its heart, no matter what gravy you baptize it in. And at the very end, the bone itself, cracked with the cleaver, your hands feeling the crack travel up the handle, surrenders its last marrow and gristle to the stock pot, and even then it is not finished, because the dripping, all the fat poured and scraped from every stage, is clarified and potted and becomes the servant's butter, becomes your breakfast, and the bones after boiling are sold, actually sold, to the rag and bone man for a few farthings, to be ground for fertilizer or boiled again, by industry this time, for the glue and gelatine trades, which means follow this thread with me, that the calf's foot jelly on a fashionable table and the penny glue in a carpenter's pot are the same substance at different addresses, and somewhere in London there is almost certainly a table jelly quivering on a stand that began its career as somebody else's dinner bones. Nobody asks. In 1857 the wise stomach does not trace pedigrees. The cod from last night has a future too, and its future is called twice laid, an old navy dish. The cold boiled fish picked from its skin, your fingers working through the clammy flakes feeling for the pin bones, each one a tiny needle against your fingertip, then mashed with cold potato and a little of that everlasting melted butter sauce, shaped into cakes, floured, fried in dripping, and served at breakfast, where it is received without comment, because fish cakes made of yesterday are simply what Tuesday tastes like. And the fowl carcasses go to the pot for a soup the cookery books call, with no shame whatsoever, remains soup. But the true monument of thrift cookery, the dish I have been saving, the one that gets quoted a century and a half from now whenever people want to laugh at this age, is coming out of a book that at this very moment, in 1857, is being assembled in a house in Pinner by a young woman named Isabella Beeton, 21 years old, who is writing and compiling the household management book that will define the English kitchen for 50 years, and in that book, among the Invalid and economical receipts, will stand, in perfect seriousness, the toast sandwich. I will give it to you complete. Take a thin slice of bread, toast it, place it between 2 slices of untoasted bread and butter. Season with salt and pepper. That is the whole dish. Bread. Between bread. It is recommended for invalids. And here is the thing. The thing that stops the laugh halfway up your throat. It is not stupid. In a world where the sick must be fed blandness on purpose, and the poor must be fed something, anything, for the least money, a toast sandwich is dry texture for a rebelling stomach and a full mouth for a farthing, and Mrs. Beeton knew her readers, and her readers were not laughing. You have eaten bread and dripping standing up every morning for 8 months. You are not laughing either. The worst tasting recipes of this age are almost never cruelty. They are arithmetic, performed by women, under pressure, forever. Mrs. Grimshaw comes down at 5:30 and the 2 of you turn yesterday's battlefield back into a kitchen, and at 8:30 she looks at you over the slate and says the sentence that changes the shape of the day. You're for Marylebone this morning, mistress's orders. Because the mistress, it turns out, heard everything last night, the mistress hears everything eventually. The house is a whispering gallery with carpets, and the mistress has decided 2 things. First, that the Purslow's confectioner is to be looked at quietly, because Mrs. Purslow is her friend, and her friend's nursery-maid buys sweets there every week. And second, since a girl is going west anyway, there is a list. Isinglass and hartshorn shavings from the Italian warehouse on Baker Street, a bottle of the mistress's particular anchovy essence, and a call at the Tinman's off Paddington Street, because after last night every mould in this kitchen is going to be looked over, and the chipped one goes for retinning today, not Friday today. So at 9 o'clock you come up the area steps in your white apron, the white one, with the basket and the wrapped copper mould heavy on your arm, and you walk west out of Bloomsbury with the whole morning city around you, and I want to walk this mile with you slowly, because the streets of London are their own cookbook, and it is the 3rd cookbook of the age, after the Book of Show and the Book of Thrift, the book of the streets, the food of the people who have no kitchen at all. Understand that first. A single room in a poor court has no range, no oven, often no fire you could cook on, and so hundreds of thousands of Londoners eat their meals standing in the street, bought hot from other poor people, and the journalist Henry Mayhew has spent these very years walking these very streets counting them. The coffee stall keepers and the pea soup men and the eel pie women, writing them down by the thousand. You pass a coffee stall at the corner of Tottenham Court Road, a great shining can with a charcoal fire under it, penny a mug, and the coffee is half chicory and the chicory's half roasted whatever, and the men drinking it around the stall in the raw air, cabmen and market porters, know that perfectly well and drink it anyway because it is hot and sweet and it is theirs. You pass the ham sandwich man, and the baked potato can with its little tin chimney smoking, potatoes a halfpenny, butter and salt included, the seller turning them in the hot chamber with a fork, and the smell of them, earthy and scorched and steaming into the cold, is frankly better than anything that went up to the dining room last night. And if you had a halfpenny of your own, you would spend it here, and you do not have a halfpenny of your own. Your wages are paid quarterly, and quarterly is 5 weeks away. And you pass the things that are harder to love, a whelk stall, The grey coiled bodies pinned out on saucers with vinegar, the vinegar sharp with its secret acid. A trotter woman with her basket of boiled sheep's feet, pale and glistening, gnawing food, gelatinous and faintly sweet, sold mostly at the doors of public houses at night. A boy selling watercress, tied in halfpenny bundles, and watercress is fresh and green and good. And watercress also grows in streams, and the streams it grows in around London are the streams London drains into, and the cholera that swept this city 8 years ago, and will come again in pockets, rides in exactly such water, and nobody yet can prove it, though a quiet doctor named John Snow, 3 years ago, took the handle off a pump in Soho and watched an epidemic stop, and was politely disbelieved by almost everyone official, and the pump handle went back on. That is the world you are walking through. A city that eats from its own drain and argues about miasmas. And then, on a corner off the Marylebone Road, the smell you've been half looking for finds you first. Hot pastry, hot spiced gravy, and the pie shop. Eel pie. The great street dish of the age, and the eels come up the Thames alive in barges from the Dutch ports, kept in floating chests in the river, the same river. Yes, we have covered the river, and the pie woman's shop window is fogged from within, and through the fog the pies sit in ranks, and a man in a paper cap eats one on the step with the gravy running into his sleeve. And here is the piece of street theatre Mayhew wrote down, and I give to you intact. The pie men who work the streets with trays will toss you for it. A coin spun in the air. Call it right and the pie is free. Call it wrong and you pay your penny and get nothing. And everyone plays because a gamble makes even a penny pie taste of luck. You are staring. You know you are staring. And the pie woman, broad as her own doorway, arms floured to the elbow, has seen 1,000 girls stare, and she looks at your white apron and your heavy basket and your face doing sums it can't afford, and she jerks her head, and when you step near she puts into your hand, without a word about money, a pie that came out cracked, a seconds pie, staff food, and says, "Mind the bones. Ducks, they're honest bones, more than some shops can say," and laughs at her own joke with a sound like a cart on gravel, and you eat it walking, and it is hot and peppery, and the eel is rich and sweet-fleshed between the soft fat pastry, and the gravy scalds the roof of your mouth, and you do not care, and I want the record to show, formally, in an episode about the worst food of the Victorian age. Some of it, eaten standing in the cold by somebody young and hungry, was wonderful. And the same age that fed arsenic to children in green sugar also fed a friendless kitchen maid a free pie on a grey morning. And both of those facts are true at once, and holding both at once is what knowing history actually feels like. The confectioner's shop near Nottingham Place is exactly as pretty as you feared. Bow window, gold letters, and behind the glass a garden of impossible colours. Pyramids of sugared almonds, rose pink and leaf green. Barley sugar twisted like cathedral pillars. Fondant drops in papers. A wedding cake top like a snow palace. And green everywhere. Pistachio creams and angelica and crystallized green gages, every green slightly different, and several of them that mineral beetle green you now know on sight the way you know the smell of turned meat. You have no orders to accuse anybody. Your orders are to look and to buy 2 ounces of the plainest white peppermints, and to notice. Inside, the shop smells of hot sugar and vanilla, which is one of the great smells of the world, and the confectioner is a small tired man with burn scars up both forearms. the flat, pale, slick scars of boiling sugar, which burns worse than boiling water because it sticks, and his apprentice in the back room is pouring something molten from a copper pan onto a marble slab, and the sound of it, the heavy sliding hiss, comes through the door. And while he weighs your peppermints, you look, the way Mrs. Grimshaw taught you to look at anything, at the shelf behind him, and there among the innocent jars stand the colours in their papers and pots, and one squat pot has a label in a chemist's hand, and you are 8 months out of a Suffolk village and you can read it. Emerald green, which is the trade's sweeter name for the same copper arsenic pigment, the way undertakers say passed instead of died. He follows your eyes. He is not a stupid man, and something in your stillness tells him what house you might have come from, because news of a poisoned banker's child travels through tradesmen's Marylebone faster than the post, and he says, not defensively, just wearily, wrapping the twist of peppermints with quick scarred fingers, "The mothers want green, miss? I sell a plain white sugar plum and a green one side by side, penny each. The green sells 5 to 1. I use less than some. There's shops down Lisson Grove way use it by the fistful and chalk besides, and plaster in the lozenges, and I'll tell you what I told the doctor's man this morning. Give me a law. Give me a law that binds every shop the same, and I'll throw that pot in the river today, gladly, because the honest man can't afford to be honest alone. Alone it just makes his sweets grey, and grey don't sell." And there it is. You will think about that sentence for years, and so should we, because the confectioner has just explained, standing behind his own pretty poisoned window, the entire economic machinery of adulteration, better than a parliamentary committee could. It is not one villain, it is a race, and every shop that refuses to run loses, and the only way anyone can stop running is if everyone must stop at once, and that is what a law is for, and there is no law yet, and there will be no real one until 1860, a weak one, and then 1872, and 1875, stronger, and inspectors and public analysts in white coats sampling milk on railway platforms, and it will take the Bradford dead and 30 more years of Hassel's microscope to build all that, and every safe bite you, listening to me now in your bed, have eaten today, every label you didn't have to think about, is the long, quiet echo of arguments that started in shops like this one, on mornings like this one, between tired, scarred men and the age they lived in. You take your peppermints and go, and they are white, and you check. The tinman's workshop off Paddington Street is the opposite of the sweet shop in every way, and you like it immediately. Down a yard, through a door into a low room lit by a charcoal hearth, hung wall to ceiling with copper, pans, moulds, fish kettles, preserving pans, some new tinned and gleaming like wet moons, some in black and battered, waiting. The tinman is an old man named Vokes with white bristles, and hands so scarred and stained they look carved rather than grown, and he takes the mistress's jelly mould and turns it to the light, and finds the chip in the lining with one fingernail on the first pass, tick, like a bird finding the grub, and grunts, the same grunt as Mrs. Grimshaw's, the universal grunt of the competent confronting the fixable, and because you have to wait while he does 2 small pans ahead of you, you watch him work, and this is worth watching, so stay with me by the charcoal fire a minute. He scours the inside of a saucepan bright with acid and sand, the sharp vinegar and metal smell cutting through the charcoal. Then the pan goes over the fire until it would hiss at a wet finger, and he wipes the hot copper with sal ammoniac, a white smoke rising sudden and bitter, and then he takes a bar of pure tin, just a dull grey stick of metal, and touches it to the inside of the hot pan, and the tin lets go of itself, melts at the touch, runs, and with a pad of tow in his bare-looking fingers, he chases the silver pool around the copper, coaxing, wiping, spreading, until the whole inside of the pan is a new-made mirror, and the pan is safe again, and a family somewhere will never know. Will boil their vinegar pickles and stew their rhubarb in that pan for 2 more years without a thought, because a man in a yard did this for 8p. Tin's soft, he says, feeling you watching. He talks the way he works in small economical movements. Wears through. Cook scours too hard, wears faster. Then the copper's at the food, and the food's at the family. He holds up the mistress's mould, tilts the chip to the light. This here, small, but small's how it starts. Your cook caught it? Last night, in the jelly, it went green at the chip. Then your cook's worth her wages, and you tell her Vokes said so. He sets the mould in his queue and looks at you a moment over the top of it. An old man in a copper cave sizing up a girl. You look at things. I watched you looking. Most that come in here stand and breathe through their mouths. He turns back to his fire. Keep looking, girl. Kitchen's all looking. Poison, waste, thieving, fire. It's all caught by looking or not at all. Nobody's coming down those stairs to look for you. Nobody's coming down those stairs to look for you. You carry that out of the yard along with the receipt ticket, and it settles in beside the confectioner's sentence. 2 lessons in 1 morning, the shape of the whole age from below. No law is coming, no inspector is coming. The line between dinner and poison in the year 1857 is held by looking, by cooks who smell the blade and tinmen who feel the chip, by an unpaid, uncounted, invisible army of the careful, and last night, without anyone planning it, you were sworn into it. And then, because your feet must go north anyway to the Italian warehouse, and because the morning has run quicker than the list, and because you are 15 and it may never be offered again, you commit the one small crime of your day. You take the long way, 20 minutes long, north, up past the Marylebone Church, up the rising ground, through the gate into the Regent's Park where the nursemaids push their carriages, and beyond it, standing green and bare against the moving sky, Primrose Hill, and you climb it, basket, mould ticket, peppermints and all, your breath ribboning white, your legs burning in a clean outdoor way completely different from the kitchen's dull ache, up the wet grass to the top, 200 feet above the river, and you turn around, and there it is, all of it. London from above on a November morning between fogs. It runs to the edge of the world in every direction, a plain of slate and brick under a tide of smoke, the smoke of 600,000 fires, lifting and leaning all one way like a field of grey wheat in a wind, and out of it stand the landmarks like ships. St. Paul's far off to the southeast, riding the smoke, and the towers of Westminster with the scaffolding still on the great clock tower. They have been building it for years, and the vast bell for it was cast just last year and cracked, and they will cast another, and in 2 years it will begin to strike and the world will call it Big Ben. And nearer, the long glass roofs of the new railway stations catching what light there is, and everywhere between the monuments, the roofs, the uncountable roofs, and under every single roof, this is the thought that takes hold of you on the hill and will not let go. Under every single one of those roofs is a fire, and at every fire somebody is cooking or waiting for someone who is. 2.5 million people. The largest city that has ever existed on the earth. Larger than Rome ever was. Larger than anything. And it eats every day. You stand on the hill doing the arithmetic no one down there ever does at once. The cattle walk in even now toward the new market at Copenhagen Fields, thousands a week. The fleets of colliers bringing the coal, the eel barges from Holland, the watercress from the drowned meadows, the milk from the dark sheds, and the chalk from wherever chalk comes from. The tea from China, half of it not tea, the sugar from the islands with the mites in it, the wheat and the alum in the wheat, the whole staggering, roaring, half-poisoned supply of it flowing in every morning through the markets, through Billingsgate and Smithfield and Covent Garden, out along the streets in carts and baskets, down area steps, into basements, into the hands of 100,000 women like Mrs. Grimshaw, and girls like you, who stand between all of it and all of them, looking. And the smoke over the city is dinner. That's what you understand on the hill. That's the revelation for the price of 20 stolen minutes. The great grey-brown canopy that darkens the churches and yellows the fog and settles on the washing, the famous filthy breath of London, is, when you follow it down every chimney to its root, mostly this, mostly women at ranges, mostly mutton and gruel and remains soup, the visible exhaust of 2.5 million appetites, and you are one flake of it. One fire among the 600,000, 4 floors down under a roof you could not find again from here if you tried, and the strange thing is that this does not make you feel small. It makes you feel placed. A person can be tiny and load-bearing at the same time. Ask any nail in any roof down there. The wind comes over the hill smelling of grass and coal, and far off a train whistles going into Euston, and you fill your chest twice with the cleanest air it will get this month, and then you turn your back on the whole city and go down, because the isinglass won't buy itself. And Mrs. Grimshaw can read the length of an errand off a clock face like scripture, and 20 minutes is exactly as much sky as your life can carry today. The afternoon back in the kitchen is ordinary, and I want to give you one ordinary afternoon in full before we let the weeks begin to run, because the ordinary afternoons are where this age actually lived, and because the ordinary afternoons contain the last exhibits in our museum of terrible food, the quiet everyday ones, the ones nobody even noticed were strange. Consider first the vegetables, since it is 3 o'clock and you're preparing tonight's, which is a family dinner, plain, pea soup from the ham bone, a beefsteak pie, greens, and a rice pudding. The greens are winter cabbage, and here is precisely procedurally how fashionable England murders a cabbage in 1857. It is quartered. It is soaked in salted water to evict its residents, and its residents duly float. Then it goes into a great pot of furiously boiling water with, and I need you to hear this, a lump of washing soda, actual sodium carbonate, the same substance you scrub the pans with, because soda keeps greens a bright showy green in the pot. This is standard advice. It is in the books. The same books with the copper penny in the pickles, an entire national cuisine repeatedly solving the problem of colour with chemistry and the problem of flavour by removing it. And then the cabbage boils. Not for 5 minutes. For 45 minutes to an hour by the book, until every cell wall has capitulated, until it can be pressed between 2 plates and cut with a spoon, and the water it boiled in, now holding most of what a cabbage has to offer a human body, and smelling, thanks to the soda and the hour, like the corridor of a charity ward, is poured down the drain, and the collapsed grey-green remains are pressed dry and sent up under a lid, and everyone eats them, And no one complains because this is what greens are. This is what greens have always been, and the smell of long-boiled cabbage soaks into the passage walls of 1,000,000 houses and becomes, for 100 years, the actual documented smell of English domestic life. The smell lodgers will complain of and novelists will reach for whenever they need a house to feel defeated. Consider the rice pudding, the nursery's daily bread, rice and skim milk and a scrape of nutmeg, baked till a brown skin forms, and the skin fought over or gagged over depending on the child, and it is fine. It is perfectly fine. It is also served in some form 500 times a year to every middle-class child in England, and entire memoirs will be written by those children, grown old, in which the words rice pudding carry more dread than the word Zulu. Consider tapioca, frog spawn to every schoolchild who ever met it, and sago, its pale sibling. Puddings whose entire character is texture, and whose texture is best described as deliberate. Consider junket, milk set soft with rennet scraped from a calf's stomach. A dish that answers the question, what if a pudding were almost but not quite milk? And consider at the bottom of this gentle grey pyramid the food you yourself will get tonight because the pie will be counted and the pudding will go upstairs. Bread, cheese with a suspicious orange blush to it. Because even cheese is painted. Cheap Gloucester is coloured with annatto and, in the bad shops Hassel named, has been found blushing with red lead, and small beer, brewed weak, safer than the water, which is the single most damning sentence anyone can say about a city. The beer is safer than the water. It is. Everybody knows it. Children drink small beer at breakfast in respectable households for exactly this reason, and they are not wrong to. And while your hands do the cabbage and the pie paste, cold butter and cold water and quick light fingertips, the paste chilling your fingers as flour silts into the split of your thumb, Mrs. Grimshaw, at the other end of the table, is doing the week's books with a pencil stub, muttering the litany of prices, and through her muttering you get the last lesson of the afternoon, the one that ties the whole day's horrors into one bow, and it is this. None of it is chosen. That is what the account book says, if you can read it the way she reads it. The mistress allows so much a week for the kitchen. Out of that must come dinner for the family, dinner for 6 servants, the old lady's trays, the tradesman's bills, and appearances, always appearances. The dinner parties that hold the family's credit up the way whalebone holds the mistress up, and so the cook shops where the credit is, waters nothing but knows her milkman does, stretches the joint across the week, boils the cheap cuts because cheap cuts must be boiled, colours and copies and economizes, and the fraud runs all the way up and all the way down, from the grocer's chicory to the mock in the mock turtle, one long system of respectable pretending, and at the bottom of it, holding it all up, a 50-year-old woman with a pencil stub who has not sat down since noon, and a 15-year-old girl with flour in her wounds, and neither of them will ever, in their lives, eat the dinner they are famous for. "You're staring at my book," says Mrs. Grimshaw, not looking up. "I'm learning it," you say, which is bold and true. She looks up then, weighs you, the way she weighs a fowl, thumb to the breastbone of you, and she turns the book around on the table so it faces you, and pushes the pencil across and says, "Cast up the butcher's column then, and don't guess." And you do it, carefully, penny by penny, while the cabbage roars and the pie waits, and you get it right to the farthing, and she takes the book back with a grunt, and the grunt has changed key. And that, right there, that turned book, is a promotion no registry office will ever record. You're no longer only hands, You're being taught the kitchen's head. After that afternoon, the weeks begin to run, and I'll let them. December comes, and with it the great annual madness of the Victorian kitchen, the Christmas cooking, which deserves an episode of its own some day. The pudding boiled in its cloth for 9 hours. 9. The copper going all day. The kitchen a Turkish bath smelling of soot and brandy and scorched wet linen. Every member of the household down to stir the mixture for luck, even the mistress, who descends into your world for 4 minutes, stirs once with the wrong hand, laughs at the strangeness of her own kitchen like a tourist, and ascends, and the mark of her heels stays in your scrubbed floors damp like a visitation. The mincemeat is made with real mince beef in it, this being still the old style, meat and suet and fruit and spice all together in one pot. Medieval eating alive and well under a modern roof. And the bird is a goose, and you pluck it in the scullery in a blizzard of your own making, down sticking to your wet knuckles, to your eyelashes floating in the light, and the smell of singed pin feathers when you pass the carcass over a burning paper is a smell you will carry to your last Christmas on earth. January is cold mutton weather, thrift weather, the dead months when the household draws in, and you learn the deep winter jobs, salting the pork in its crock, your hands aching in the brine, the salt finding the split thumb with a joy that makes you hiss through your teeth, potting the remains of everything under lids of clarified butter, meat entombed in fat to keep it, which works mostly, and when it doesn't work, Mrs. Grimshaw's nose knows at one pass, and overboard it goes, because, and she says this with the flat weight of a commandment, sooner waste than bury, girl, meaning sooner lose the shilling than the family, and you understand now after the night of the green sweets that this sentence is the entire moral law of her profession, and that not every kitchen keeps it. February, the old lady upstairs fails a little, and the invalid tray grows even paler. Arrowroot now, arrowroot jelly, a clear trembling nothing made of pure starch and water, with a teaspoon of port wine bled into it like a sunset in an empty sky, and you carry it up, and one afternoon Sarah is busy, and the nurse is asleep in her chair, and for the first time in your service you carry the tray all the way in, past the baize door, into the dim lavender room, and set it down, and the old lady, who is small and folded and bright-eyed as a wren in her nest of pillows, watches you and says, in a voice like paper, "You're the one who makes my gruel." And you say, "Yes, ma'am," and she says, "It's better than my mother's cook made, smoother." And then, conspiratorially, with a wren's sudden wickedness, "It is also, child, the nastiest stuff on God's earth, and when I am well I shall have a mutton chop and mustard, and they may all faint." And you laugh, out loud, in a sick room above stairs, a crime in at least 3 categories, and she laughs too, papery and pleased, and no one ever finds out, and it is possibly your favourite thing that happens all winter. March, and the light changes, and the mornings stop being a wound, and become merely a weight. The range, and you have reached an understanding by now. You can read its moods from the colour at the bars, feed it left-handed, bank it half asleep. Your hands have changed. The chilblains retreat with the frost. The split thumb finally closes, leaving a fine white seam you will have at 80. The grey never quite leaves the creases of your knuckles. But the hands themselves have become something else, quicker, surer. Hands that can bone a fowl in 8 minutes and feel a farthing's error in a flour sack by heft. Hands with opinions, and sometimes in the evening you look at them by candlelight. These competent strangers on the ends of your arms, and you can no longer quite find the hands that came up from Suffolk in them, the way you can no longer quite find the girl. Because the girl who arrived last spring believed food was simple. Food in the village was what you grew, killed or traded for, and it was poor and sometimes short, but it was never a lie. The person you are becoming knows better and worse than that. You know now that food is language, that every dish in this city is saying something, and mostly what it is saying is not edible. The mock turtle says, "We dine as the aldermen dine." The white bread says, "We are not the sort who eat brown." The green sweet says, "Love me, I am pretty, and never mind the rest." The boiled cabbage says, "We are moderate, digestible, English, and safe." The gruel says, "Illness is a kind of penance, and we are performing it correctly." The toast sandwich says, "We are poor, but we are poor properly with salt and pepper." An entire civilization talking to itself constantly, at every meal, in a code of pallor and wobble and boiled out virtue, and almost none of it, when you finally break the code, is about taste at all. That is the secret you've been circling all year. So let me say it plainly, the way it comes to you one evening with your arms in the sink. The worst tasting food in Victorian England does not taste bad by accident. It tastes bad on purpose. Bad taste is the taste of restraint, of digestion, of class, of money saved and money displayed, of fear dressed as virtue. They could have cooked otherwise. Their grandmothers, frankly, cooked otherwise, with spice and herbs and pot liquor scents, and their grandchildren will again. This particular generation boiled the flavour out of its life deliberately, the way it laced its women and blackened its ceilings, and called the result respectability. And if you want to understand the Victorians truly, you can read 100 sermons, or you can taste 1 spoonful of soda-boiled cabbage, and the cabbage will tell you more. April, and 2 things happen in the same week, and together they close our year. The first is that word comes through the tradesman's telegraph, butcher to cook to kitchen, that the shop down Lisson Grove way, the one the tired confectioner spoke of, the fistful shop, has poisoned a christening party with green sugar ornaments off the cake. No one dead. God is merciful to the careless, but 11 children sick, and this time a magistrate is interested, and the Lancet's man has been to the shop with his bottles, and the confectioner with the burn-scarred arms was right about everything. Alone, honesty makes your sweets grey. Only a law can make the whole street honest at once, and laws in England are made of exactly this, of sick children in 2s and 11s accumulating year on year, until the pile is finally high enough to be seen from Westminster. It will take until you are a grown woman, but it starts in years like this one, in kitchens and shops like these, among people who looked. The second thing is smaller, and it is yours. On the last Sunday in April, your afternoon out, you walk to Primrose Hill again, lawfully this time, in your own time, with Martha from Gordon Square, and the 2 of you sit on the top of the hill in the first real sun of the year eating your Sunday treasure. A 2-penny loaf, fresh, and a screw of paper with real butter, and between you, bought with 3 weeks of hoarded pennies, 1 orange. The city rolls out below in a light so clean you can count steeples. Martha talks about her cook who throws things, and about a footman at her house who has opinions about her, and you listen and peel the orange with your quick, sure murderer of cabbages hands, and the smell of the zest goes up into the spring air, sharp and bright and utterly unboiled. The single most honest flavour either of you has met since Christmas, and you divide it segment by segment, absolutely evenly, Because you are, the rector said so, honest, and the two of you sit there in the sun above the smoke of 600,000 dinners, eating sunlight out of a peel, and you're 15 going on 16, and your back aches, and your hands are grey, and your wages are £8 a year, and you would not, at this precise moment, on this grass with this orange, trade places with the Queen, who is at Windsor, and whose dinner tonight will be boiled. And that is the day, that is the year, that is the age near enough. Let it settle now. Because it is night again, the plain night at the end of an ordinary day, and you are back where we found you, in the attic room at the top of the tall, thin house, and the story is nearly done, and you are nearly done. And so, I suspect, are you, listening wherever you are, so let us go down together. Slowly, the way the house goes down into sleep. The range is banked, 4 floors below you, breathing its slow, orange breath behind the bars, the fire you lit before dawn still alive in there under its blanket of small coal, waiting for morning the same as you. The larder is cold and ordered, the milk covered, the meat safe on the marble, the copper hanging bright on its hooks, every pan tinned and sound, and nothing in that dark stone room tonight will hurt anyone, because 2 women looked at all of it, and looking is the whole of the law. Sarah is asleep beside you already, her breathing slow, her cold feet finding your shin the way they always do, and you no longer mind. Honestly, you stopped minding months ago. The feet are part of the bed now, part of the night. One more fixed point in a day made entirely of fixed points. And there is a strange comfort in that which nobody tells you about when you are young. How the things you cannot change become, in time, the things that hold you up. Your body is putting itself out like the lamps of the house, floor by floor. The feet first, throbbing softly, then quiet. The knees, the long muscles of your back, unknotting one by one, each one letting go with a small warm ache like a knuckle uncracking. Your hands last. Always your hands, lying open on the blanket, done, empty, finished, and even the fine white seam on your thumb is only a seam tonight, only a line, only a place where something healed. The house ticks and settles around you. A coal shifts in a distant grate. A cart passes, streets away, iron on stone, fainter, fainter. Somewhere below, the long case clock in the hall clears its throat and strikes 11, and the sound comes up through the floors, soft as something falling into deep water, and you count 4 of the strikes and lose the rest. The city is still eating out there even now. The hot potato cans glowing at the corners, the trotter woman at the public house door, the pie shops steaming their windows blind. The great markets already at this hour, beginning to rumble awake at the far edges of the dark, the wagons rolling in toward Covent Garden, with the earth still on the roots, so that London's tomorrow is being carried toward it, while London sleeps. The way your fire waits banked in the dark, the way the bread rises somewhere in 1,000 bakeries, everything prepared, everything tended, everything held through the night by somebody, and tonight, for once, the somebody is not you. You did your part, it's done. Let it be done. Centuries will pass. The house on Woburn Place will change hands, and change again, and the range will be torn out for a gas stove, and the gas stove for another, and the basement kitchen where you spent your one wild and precious youth will become a flat with spotlights in the ceiling, and the people who live there will boil a kettle in 90 seconds and never once think of the girl who knelt on that spot in the dark with a match. The green pigment will be outlawed, and the alum and the chalk, and men and women in laboratories will spend whole careers making sure that a child's sweet is only sugar, and they will succeed so completely that the danger will be forgotten, which is the only monument that kind of work ever gets. The boiled cabbage will unclench, decade by decade. The Empire's spices will finally come out of the hold and into the pot, and the mock turtle will vanish so utterly that people will meet it only as a sad kind character in a children's book, a creature with a calf's head, weeping, and they will not know why, and now you know why. But some things will not change. Under every roof, a fire, or the memory of one. In every city, someone up before the light, making the food that lets everyone else pretend food makes itself. In every age, the quiet ones who look, who smell the blade, who check the tinning, who stand unseen between the dinner and the dark. And at the end of every one of their days this, a bed, a blanket, a body finally allowed to be heavy. Yours is heavy now. Good. Let it be heavy. Let the day go. The fire is banked. The larder is safe. The accounts are cast to the farthing. Let the sounds go. The cart is gone. The clock has struck. The city is only a murmur now, a sea heard from far inland. Let the year go. The gruel and the jelly, the green sweets and the orange on the hill, the worst food in the world and the best, all of it stirred down together into the dark, into the warm dark, into the place where the days go when they are truly finished. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a roof and a fire 4 floors down, still faintly yours, and tomorrow will ask for you at 5. But tomorrow is not here, and this hour belongs to no one but you, and you are spending it exactly right. So let sleep take you the way the tide takes a boat off the mud. No effort, no decision, just a lifting and a slow turning loose. Let the world fade. Let the noise quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. You've earned this rest. Take it and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.